Beloved, we are gathered here today to talk about Preacher.
Yay! Praise the Lord and pass the ammunition.
So you are listening to another episode of the Good News, the Gospel According to AMC's Preacher. I am Tulip.
And I am Cassidy.
Otherwise known as Dianne and Marnell. So we're doing what AMC calls episode 2. We're going to call it episode 3.
We are. I've definitively decided we are calling it episode 3 because I had an argument today and my other half showed me something on AMC where they actually list the possibilities as episode 3. So they have episode 1, 2, and 3. They don't have a 0 episode. There's no such thing as a 0 episode.
Really?
So, yeah, we're calling this episode 3. It's going by the numbers from now on.
Okay, I'm good with that because it's confusing otherwise.
Exactly. We have to explain it every single time. So speaking of the numbers, what are the numbers?
Do you want to talk about TV ratings or do you want to talk about our ratings?
TV ratings first.
Okay. So I couldn't find the rating site that I looked at last time, but I remember that the number was right around 1.4 million same-day viewing, which was down a little bit more from episode 2. But I did, while I was looking for numbers information about Preacher, I did see some really good news, which is that it had significant gains in same-day numbers over the July 4th through 10th week. Mm-hmm. So that makes me super happy.
I believe that is post Game of Thrones.
I think you're right. We talked about that last time, and I think that's really a real factor. It certainly was a real factor for Fear the Walking Dead as well.
Yes, absolutely. And you know, I do have to say that I was trying to rewatch an episode tonight on my Kindle, and I would have to sign into AMC to do it. Well, my cable provider has dropped AMC.
No.
Yeah, they did it before the last half of last season of The Walking Dead. And, you know, AMC, I love you. You got great programming, but I see my cable provider's side of it. You know, they're basically holding the channel ransom over the cable providers. And, you know, they've had, I think, was it DirecTV or Dish that they had this issue with a couple of years ago?
It was DirecTV, and there's been some back and forth with Dish, but we have Dish and they're still carrying them. Yeah,
so right now people in Alaska are stuck getting their AMC fix through alternate sources.
With the exception of those of us who do have Dish.
Right.
So I need Jesse to yell, "Be quiet," at the dogs because they're howling right now.
I just hear barking.
There's howling going on too.
Aww.
Yeah, so what are you going to do? Are you going to buy them on iTunes or?
Yeah. That's we are forced into an alternate source for all of our AMC shows, which, you know, right now we were just watching Walking Dead, Fear the Walking Dead, and Preacher. You know, we haven't done any of the Better Call Saul or Breaking Bad or anything like that. Which, of course, Breaking Bad's off the air now, but
and I think you can get it on Netflix.
That's a possibility.
Yeah, pretty sure you can. I binged on Breaking Bad, and I'm pretty sure that's how I did it.
But yeah, so not like Alaska's like a huge market for them, but you know, they do have some issue, and that's just Alaska. I mean, if you didn't know about that, not having GCI cable, which is my cable provider for Alaska, if you didn't know about that, who knows, you know, what other little podunk cable providers that, you know, they're having this back and forth with. But so yeah, I would love to call my cable provider and tell them to get AMC back, but you know, I see their side of it, you know.
Well, and AMC's got the power right now.
They do, but you know, you're going to be up and down. You know, AMC's got some really good programming, but, you know, 10 years ago it was must-see TV. You know, it was ABC, NBC, CBS, you know, all of the other channels. And, you know, now it's, AMC, I think MTV, Chronicles of Shannara, MTV had Chronicles, and that was a really good one. some other, just some really off channels, like channels 10 years ago that were, running B movies that, straight to DVD or straight to video. So AMC's on their upswing, or has been on their upswing, but that doesn't always last. So
Stars is also getting huge. They have Outlander. They've got the Evil Dead sequel. I think it's Ash versus the Evil Dead.
Yes,
yeah, which is awesome.
Too.
And then they also are going ahead with a plan to record and show American Gods.
I was
which
just
is
seeing
the
that.
best book ever.
So we're really big fans of the CW show, The 100. Mm-hmm. And there's a character on The 100 that was actually killed off on the show that wasn't killed off in the books. And he was killed off because he and the showrunner had a personal issue. And so the showrunner was just like, guess what? You're fired. And so they killed off the character, but now he's starring in American Gods. So I'm like,
excellent.
Gonna have to
Is that
check
the guy
that
who's
out.
playing Shadow?
Yes.
Excellent.
Uh-huh.
Okay, so we have horribly digressed from Preacher.
Yes, we have.
So how did you rate this episode 3, The Possibilities?
I rated it better. I rated it a 3.3, and I don't have any clever ratings, but I rated it a 3.3 out of 5 because we're starting to coalesce some of our storylines a little bit, and things are starting to come together a little more. We didn't start out in outer space. We didn't start out at 1881. We didn't even see the cowboy at all in this episode. Mm-hmm. So I did rate it a 3.3, better than 2, not as good as 1 still. Of course, the pilot episode's always going to be the one that catches you.
Mm-hmm.
So what is your rating?
I've got to tell you, you are going to be my Brian. For those who don't know, that's my co-host for Biters, which is a Walking Dead podcast, and we're fairly opposite most of the time.
We are juxtaposed.
We are juxtaposed, exactly. So this week I rated episode 3 a 3 out of 5 painfully small sheriff's hat. And I rated it a little bit lower because for me, while there were some great moments in this episode, it wasn't as good for me as 1 or 2 were.
See, and that surprises me because this was kind of a Donnie is a douche heavy episode.
Right.
So that actually really surprises me.
Well, for me, 3 is kind of an average rating. I have to be honest and say it takes a lot to push me down below a 3 on anything that I rate.
It's hard to give, a 4 or 5 because where do you go from there?
Right.
I mean, I guess you can score an 11 out of 10 or a 6 out of 5, but...
I haven't done that in the podcast world, but I certainly could.
Well, I will tell you, as a Game of Thrones fan, the season finale was an 11 out of 10. Yeah. Yeah. So I actually am going to steal your sunshine a little bit more.
Okay.
So last week we featured Tulip as our character of the week, or episode character. And, you and I really love Tulip. Girl crush, we all want to be Tulip. I talked to somebody and they were like, I don't like Tulip.
How could they say that?
I know, right? So
I hope that person is subscribed to our podcast.
They actually gave me a reason that while I can't argue with, I still love Tulip. But their reasoning is Tulip is constantly trying to suck Preacher back into a life that he is trying to get out of. And she's always telling him, no, this isn't you. I know you. You're not like this. Yet, imagine if the roles were reversed. If this were a guy coming to a woman trying to make a new life and being like, this isn't you. You need to come back to your old life.
Okay, that is a reasonable
valid.
argument.
I know. I was like, damn, steal my sunshine.
I don't agree, but that's a reasonable argument.
I don't agree, but I still think she's a badass, so...
Well, it's pretty funny because I was looking at the Preacher Wiki, mm-hmm. and they had a poll up, who's your favorite character? Cassidy wins by a landslide, at least where the poll stands currently. He had 180 votes. Jesse had 48 and Tulip had 40.
Okay, but so I really think the fan base is young men. So, of course, they all want to be Cassidy.
Or they want to have Cassidy.
There you go. That's very true.
I could see the appeal either way, quite honestly.
Yeah, he'd be fun.
So, the title of the episode was The Possibilities, and we talked last week about, maybe they're kind of stringing these titles together, because if you put last week and this week together, it's See the Possibilities.
Yes.
So, what did you think that it referred to, or did you think it referred to anything greater than just kind of that idea?
I really think this one was just kind of smacking you on the forehead with the title, because even Cassidy, when Preacher revealed his power to Cassidy, even Cassidy was like, "Oh, the possibilities,"
Right. For me, I went just a tad farther. This is really about Jesse exploring some of the possibilities of his power, and we see him doing that on his own, and then we also see him doing it in that great segment with Cassidy. I think the other thing that is really critical about this episode is Jesse really sees both the good potential and the potential for mistakes.
I don't think he sees that yet.
Oh, I disagree, so we'll have to get on to that.
I can tell you right now, and it just came to me about an hour ago as I was prepping for the episode. So the character Linus that he's the bus driver, and he tells him, forget her.
Yeah.
The little girl that Linus was creeping on. And so the scene where all the kids are getting on the bus, and of course, we talked about last week, we were like, he'll be fine, like he's not too scarred, you see a big bandage on his face and everything. Mm-hmm. And he looks at the little girl and he's like, who are you?
Yeah.
Are you new? Is this your first day? But Jesse only told him, forget her. He didn't say stop creeping on her, quit being a creep. He just said, forget her. So now he's going to re-meet her. He's going to see her 5 days a week. Is he going to fall back into, how far does the power reach? It seems to be very literal, like, open your heart to her.
So I totally agree with that as a potential problem with the power. I'll talk more about my thoughts about whether or not he sees the potential problem with the power, because it's actually part of my my gospel, my good news. So
I have a little bit of a future possible prediction about it too. So we'll get into the good news.
So, well, first we've got just a little bit more. So the author was a guy named Chris Kelly.
Ah, that's right.
I tried to find some information about him on IMDb and couldn't really find anything. And in fact, IMDb doesn't really even reference him as the author. The Walking Dead wiki does for this episode. And I saw it when I was watching the episode again, that he was referenced as the author for this episode.
Wait, the Walking Dead wiki or the Preacher wiki?
Did I say Walking Dead wiki?
You did.
I'm sorry. The Preacher wiki. So all I can say is it's years of habit at this point.
Yeah, and there are just some shows that stick out. I mean, These are the shows we put our phones down for.
Yeah. So the director of this episode was a guy named Scott, I think it's Winant, Winant. Mm-hmm. And he's got some really awesome credits. So he's directed True Blood, he's directed Breaking Bad. He started out on the show 30-something.
Ah! Wow.
And he's also got credits for things like My So-Called Life and Californication. So he comes to the series with a really good pedigree.
Yes, absolutely. Did you ever watch My So-Called Life?
I'm going to be embarrassed to say no, but no, I haven't.
It was a little past your time. It was one of those where I was kind of the same age as the protagonist in it, so it resonated with me. So
Dude, way to age me. Thank you very much. Okay, and then our featured cast member. So I was telling you that I kind of want to save Jesse for last, if possible.
if possible, yes.
Yeah, so we this week decided on Arseface, or Eugene. And the kid who plays him is a guy named Ian Coletti. Mm-hmm. There wasn't a whole lot of personal information about Ian on IMDb, but
Not even his age.
no, which I thought was interesting because he looks like a youngster.
Well, there's a movie credit for him in 2008 where he plays like a 7-year-old boy.
Aha.
Like that's and so I'm like, okay, to 8 years that would make him, no, he's not 15 now. We'll say like maybe he was 10 years old playing a 7-year-old.
Right.
He's like in his late teens, early 20s.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
I think that's right about where he is.
When you see him without the makeup, you see it.
Well, and I just wanted to comment that in real life, he's a handsome kid.
He is. He kind of he reminds me of the kid who played in The Fault of Our Star, or the Fault of the Stars, something like that.
The Fault in Our Stars.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, he reminds me of that guy.
So I have not seen that yet. Plan to someday. But he reminds me a lot of the kid who played Kurt on Glee.
I was not a Glee fan.
Oh.
I was not a Glee.
Aging myself yet again.
I'm not a huge musical fan. I know. And they had a lot of Bieber, and I couldn't do it.
Dude, you missed out on a tremendous phenomenon.
I know.
Which I probably just lost anyone who's listening to us at all. They're probably like, okay, she liked Glee, I'm turning this shit off.
It'll be one of those that, like, in 5 years, I'll binge watch, and I'll be like, what was I thinking? This is amazing.
So, Ian Coletti, back to the kid who plays Arseface. He's got some movie credits, and I was familiar with one of them. I wasn't familiar with the other. So he's got credits for Phoebe in Wonderland, a movie called Jimmy, where he plays the lead character. He was in Baby Mama, which is a Tina Fey movie.
I have not seen that yet.
He's...
I've not seen anything that he has been in besides Preacher.
And I haven't either, to be honest. I mean, I was looking through some of his other credits. He was in a TV series that looks like it got one season, and it was called Rake. It had Greg Kinnear in it. And he's had a number of other small TV roles and a couple of small movie roles, too.
He's been acting for 12 years, though. So
yeah,
if he is in his late teens and early 20s, he's doing okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The only other thing that I saw about him that was kind of cool is he plays a bunch of different musical instruments, so he's got quite a bit of talent.
Ah!
Yeah.
That's amazing. So, I totally just lost. Oh, what's funny, on his IMDb, the IMDb for Preacher, they have him listed as Arseface. There's no, like, Arseface / Eugene. It's just Arseface. So, that's interesting. I don't know if they're going to start referring to him more as his nickname, or it's just interesting.
I think it's because that's how he's primarily known in the comic books.
Yes.
So, that's what the comic book fans know him as.
Right.
So.
Yeah, I have my little printout of like all the characters and like their names, how it's listed on IMDb, and there's a couple people where I've had to like put descriptions by them, and I did put Eugene next to his.
That's funny.
Yeah. He also has a Q&A with AMC.
Oh, really?
But I will tell you, we are recording episode 3, and it does reference some episode 5 and 6.
So spoilery stuff if you're not caught up.
Exactly.
And I'm going to be honest with you, I have stopped watching the recent episods because I'm just trying to catch up on what we're doing for the podcast. I figure we'll be good by season 2.
Yes, I'm trying to stay fresh with it.
Yeah.
I'm trying to not have my thinking and opinions skewed,
right on,
or accidentally give something away from the next episode. So I'm trying to just rewatch the episodes that we're doing. But I thought it was funny in Ian Coletti's Q&A, they asked him what he's actually drinking in his meat milkshakes.
Oh, they said it was strawberries. I think he was on Talking Preacher when Chris Hardwick did Talking Preacher, and they were saying that it was primarily strawberry based, and it still makes it look really red and meaty.
Yes. So that's I'm relieved to know that he's not drinking liquefied steak.
That is so funny. What is it about the imagery with steak and cows and beef and cattle and meat packing? You know, I mean, I know that that's got to be bigger imagery, and it flashed for me that Eugene has a small part of that imagery.
Yeah, that's very true. You know, and I think I was saying last episode that, you know, who the big baddie was going to be. Donnie's going to be probably a big baddie, you know, a big enemy of Preacher, but Odin Quincannon, you know, he's starting to get a bigger and bigger part. Yeah. And the scene that just sent chills down my spine is when he is sitting in his office.
Yes. I know where you're going.
He is playing Q*bert on an ancient computer, and he is listening to the sounds of the kill room floor like it's Enya.
Yes, I agree. And, you know, I listened to it again and I thought, okay, is that a knife slashing or is that a bolt gun?
You know, I think it's a bolt gun.
That's what I think too, just because it's consistent. It's the same sound over and over. The timing is fairly consistent.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was horrible. That was just horrifying.
And, you know, the receptionist walks in and hands him something or puts something on his desk, and he turns it up. Mm-hmm. I was like, wow.
Yeah.
Freddy Krueger.
Yeah, I agree. That scene was very striking.
Yeah. So, you know, there's a couple of things. There was another scene with him and Donnie, and it was funny. You had said last episode that Donnie was a right-hand man without a right hand, and that's exactly what Odin Quincannon said.
Oh, you actually reminded me. I'm gonna do a Todd. I was gonna Google something before we start podcasting tonight, and now I'm gonna Google it.
Ah, well, yes. So Donnie is in his Odin's office, and they're talking about something about this Green Acres company that's going to try and team up with Odin for his power plant or something. And he bullies Don. I mean, you always think that a bully has a bully. And Odin is Donnie's bully, but it still does. I still have no sympathy for Donnie. But he tells Donnie to pick up his tray, and of course he can't. It's a heavy tray, and it's imbalanced and everything, and he doesn't have use of his right arm, and so Quincannon's like a right-hand man with no right hand. Right. So I thought that was interesting. That was something that you had said last week.
What I plan on Googling, and you prompted me to do. So who sits at the right hand of God?
That's right.
Well, Jesus Christ sits at the right hand of God, which is very interesting because Jesse Custer is Jesus Christ. I mean, I actually read a reference to that when I first started watching the series, and that his initials were chosen for a reason. So
that's interesting.
And it also says here that the scripture mentions very, very little the left hand of God. And this refers also to how left-handed means sinister.
Oh, that's right. You did say that last episode. Yeah. It's the left hand, you know, people were burned at the stake for being left-handed. I mean, it's associated with sin and evil and things like that. So, yeah. Donnie is now the left-hand man.
Right, exactly.
Interesting. Well, I don't think we've seen much interaction with Odin and Jesse yet. You know it's coming.
Yeah, we're going to get there. I absolutely think we're going to get there.
Yeah, but, interesting. Very interesting.
And so this is actually saying this site, which is a a Christian website is talking about the left hand of God, and they're saying it's not always bad. It's not always an evil place to be. It's potentially another aspect of the divine will.
Maybe not. Maybe you're out of the good graces of maybe.
They're actually even referencing that potentially it's the Holy Spirit. So not so much out of good graces. But I saw when I was Googling this that there are also some references to the left hand being Lucifer. So I don't know. That's kind of interesting too. And that would hold with the Latin sinister referring to the left hand. So,
I was actually, I think it was yesterday, I was watching something, and for the life of me, I can't remember what it was, but they had a really good saying. I've heard it before, but every sinner has a future and every saint has a past. And this show just incorporates that into everything.
I was just going to say, that's perfect for Preacher because it's absolutely true.
Yeah, I mean, everyone has a chance for redemption, especially, if Jesse's going to command it of them. But, everyone's got a chance for redemption. And a lot of our good guys at this point have a really dark past.
Right, they're pretty flawed.
Right.
Yeah.
Arseface, we're looking at, he tried to kill himself. He potentially tried to kill Tracy. And, Tulip, our girl, she's got a very dark past.
She does.
Jesse's got a dark past. My favorite character is a vampire.
And he, again, is probably the best of all of them.
He really is. I guess if you live 119 years, you just kind of go with it,
Unless you live in Anne Rice's world, which you brought up last time.
Right.
So what's your good news? What's your gospel for this week?
So my good news and my bad news, actually, both surround Donnie. My good news is the scene in the gas station bathroom when he has Preacher at gunpoint, and Preacher figures out his powers. We've already seen him. It's interesting that they had him doing the scene with Cassidy where he's showing Cassidy his power, and it comes to the bathroom, and he's finally he even says, "I get it." It finally comes to him what he's got, and I don't know.
God.
I don't know if that means. You have something to add.
No, so this is my good news too, but I see it from a totally different perspective. So go ahead and finish, and then I'll share mine.
When he says, "I get it," I don't know if he means that he really gets it, like we see it from the outside, that people are taking him literally, and they have to, he's known that they have to do what he says. But at this point, does he mean that it's a very literal sense? And if that's the case, that's part of my bold prediction for the future. But yes, that was my my good for the show. And I don't know, I always try to look around what's going on. It's like it's a magic show. They're trying to occupy you with the left hand, and the right hand's adjusting the mirror.
For lack of a better expression, the left hand and the right hand.
Right, exactly. But when Donnie has the gun in his mouth in the bathroom stall, did you notice any of the graffiti around him?
I didn't. Here you go with all your Easter eggs again. Go for it. Tell me.
So the profile view, every time there's a profile view of him, there is just the word dick. So like he's sitting there with a gun in his mouth, and just like right next to him is just dick. I'm like, oh, that was on purpose.
Absolutely.
And there's a couple of other things that you'd expect to see, phone numbers and things like that, and no numbers that really jumped out at me.
Okay.
There may be one, but I think it's a very big long shot because it's way deep into the web. But very weirdly, there's just, "Hey, Twinkle."
Which is kind of funny because what does Tulip say to Jesse when he comes out of the bathroom? What were you two boys doing in there?
Well, it's funny because in the very last scene, Jesse is reading Corinthians from the Bible
Right.
at Ted's funeral, and it's Corinthians 15:51
And 52. Because I looked it up.
Okay, yeah. And 52 is where I'm going. Behold, I shew you a mystery. We shall not all sleep, but we shall all be changed. In a moment, in a twinkling of an eye, at the last trump, for the trumpet shall sound, and the dead shall be raised incorruptible, and we shall be changed. So I thought it was funny that there was, hey, twinkle, and then in Corinthians they were talking about twinkling. It was odd.
And so the thing that I really walked away, not to lose my good, because I want to go back to that, but the thing that I really walked away from the Corinthians verse with was that he's referring to his change.
Yes.
In the twinkling of an eye, in a flash,
Yes.
he somehow merged with this entity.
Yes.
And he is changed.
Yes. That's exactly what I took away from that also.
And, the whole idea of the dead being raised incorruptible, sure, that's a traditional passage to read at a funeral. It's also very interesting to me just thinking about the
two men from the
heaven.
government.
Yeah, the watchers, the angels from heaven.
Yeah, Fior and DeBlanc.
And they're cloning. They're showing up in incorruptible bodies after being dismantled by Cassidy.
Yes. He's got to get rid of 2 more bodies. At least he has access to a crematorium now.
Yeah, but he ran out of garbage bags. Did you see that?
I didn't. But he's got access to a crematorium because Ted was cremated. Yeah, he had to take Ted's body to the crematorium.
Oh,
so,
that's hilarious.
Yeah, that's going to be super convenient for Cassidy.
Yeah, it could be. All right, so
your good was the same.
My good was the same. So it was the scene in the bathroom with Donnie, just because I thought it was such a pivotal scene in the episode and in the series, I think. And it was so well done. It was really... It was good to watch. It was artsy. It was well acted. I just really enjoyed the scene.
Yes.
But I read it totally differently. So I read it as, Jesse at first is kind of swept up in the possibilities of his relationship with the entity. And he's thinking, I'm going to off this dude. I'm tired of this dude. And as he's watching Donnie shake and cry with that gun in his mouth, Jesse takes over, pushes the entity to the side, and realizes, I think, that this is really bad, that he could really give in to the bad side of this power and do things like that with impunity. And I think him saying, I get it, is him saying, I understand that this is potentially a really bad power to have.
Right. And, that's a really good point. At this point, that's probably why the entity chose him, was he seems to be the only one that can contain it literally and figuratively.
And he's got that mix, again, of light and dark, which I think is what the entity was really looking for. But the other thing that makes me think he kind of sees the potentially downside of having this entity is that right after he says, I get it, and lets Donnie go, he walks out and says to Tulip, I'm not going, I've changed my mind.
Yes, and they had plans for Carlos that included battery acid.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
And I think that he would certainly have used his power in that circumstance had they gone through with it.
Right.
So I actually think that he sees the possibilities good and bad in this episode.
Yes. And, I had actually asked you a couple of days ago if you had the power.
I'm so glad you brought this up. So what would you do?
So, okay, I didn't come up with anything clever that's kind of PC for the show, so I'm just going to kind of vaguely say. I would tell certain politicians to go F themselves, have them take it literally, film it, put it on pay-per-view, and solve the debt crisis. I mean, you honestly, you would do one of two things, and you might do both, but you do one of two things with the power. You would either be completely selfish and do everything for yourself and become the king of the world and, run for presidency.
Are you suggesting that the U.S. presidency is influenced by the entity from Preacher?
Maybe not the one from Preacher. Maybe like its evil sibling. So, and notice I haven't said anything along party lines. No. So you would be completely selfish with it, or you would be completely selfless with it, and you would try and make the world a better place. But therein lies the rub, in that what I think is a perfect world may not be what somebody else thinks is the perfect world. And, this power is so literal, it would be very difficult to articulate your wishes in a way that the outcome would be to your liking. It's almost the old tale of the genie in the bottle, where it was more of a curse than a wish granting blessing. In that, if you wish for $1,000, you're going to wind up with 1,000 male deer.
Or you're going to wind up with $1,000 because somebody died or lost their money or had to sell their house or...
Right. There's always the balance.
Yeah.
And, we go back to the dark and the light and the good and the bad, and you have to maintain that balance. And, again, that's probably why this entity chose Jesse. And so you would either be completely selfless or completely selfish. Mm-hmm. And, honestly, for me, I think I would try and be selfless, but I could totally see it backfiring.
So you and I looked at this question in a very similar way, because at first, after you posed it to me, I thought, well, I've got so much going on in my life that I would tell whoever's in charge of retirement and time put in with the agency for which I work, I would tell them to declare me retired, with full benefits, full retirement, yada, yada, yada. And
you'd set yourself up and then make the world a better place.
Well, no. So then I started thinking about it, and I thought, if I did that to someone, I would, you'd pick one person and you'd say that to that person. Well, what would likely happen is, that person would declare me retired. Someone would investigate, and that person would have to take the fall for it.
Right.
So then I thought, truthfully, if I had a power like the word, I wouldn't do anything with it. Because it's too hard to craft pure intention. It's too hard to keep your intentions pure while you're crafting something. You always are going to have someone who is on the losing side. And you have too much potential to screw it up, like Jesse did with Tracy Loach.
And Ted.
Because, he was just trying to get Ted to be honest with his mom and to get off of his back, because Jesse was tired of hearing it. And what happens? Ted ends up going and cutting his heart out.
Yes.
And Tracy Loach, I think he didn't think farther than open your eyes.
Yeah.
Because he thought that was going to solve everything, and she would be back and she would be whole. But as you said, the power is so literal that all she did was open her eyes.
Right. And we come back to the forget her. You forgot her, but he's going to re-meet.
Yeah.
He's going to see her 5 days a week.
Yeah, there's absolutely potential for that to go sour.
Right.
So, and one of the questions that I had when I was looking at this after we talked about it is, does Jesse ever get a do-over? For example, is there a do-over with Tracy?
Does it work twice?
Right. Is there a do-over with Tracy Loach now that he knows all he did was make her
a zombie?
She's in a vegetative state. He didn't fix any of that. He just basically made her constantly have her eyes open now.
Right.
From a physiologic standpoint, from kind of a morbid healthcare standpoint, if a person who's in a vegetative state never closes his or her eyes, then you have to do all these things to protect their eyes.
I was going to say there's actually been cases where people with like acid burns and stuff have had no eyelids, or people who've had too many facelifts and their eyes won't close fully. And I mean,
you run into a whole host of problems with the eye itself, with the globe. Yeah. Absolutely. So yeah. So I was, but I think you're headed in the same place I am as far as that goes, and I don't think there is a do-over. I think once the power is used on someone,
it's used up.
It's used for that particular circumstance.
Yeah. He can't tell her to forget her again. Maybe he can tell him to quit his job. But even then, I don't even think it'll solve it.
Well, and then what happens? So he quits that job, finds another job where he essentially, we're talking about Linus again, has the same situation where he has access to kids.
Right.
And he's right back acting on his disease again.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So you wouldn't even sit around and tell your dogs to be quiet?
I wouldn't, because I just think there are too many potential downsides. I mean, you say one thing with a good intention, but maybe if I told my dogs to be quiet, they'd never bark again.
And you'd miss the burglar or whatever. Yeah.
Right.
Yep. You'd walk out and be nose to nose with a bear, that they weren't barking at.
Right.
Yeah. So there is, consequences to all actions.
Absolutely.
And so, yeah, and that's where it was interesting in the episode when Cassidy was finally figured out who Fior and DeBlanc were. Mm-hmm. And he's like, okay, I'm going to convince Jesse to come to you. And it was interesting that Cassidy didn't just tell him to, F off and kill him again. Because it's an interest, it's a great power. And I don't know if Cassidy realizes the repercussions, because at that point, Preacher didn't either. And so, Fior and DeBlanc, they said this power should be held by nobody.
And I'm glad that you brought that scene up, because it actually made me think about what we talked about last week with Tulip and Cassidy kind of being the angel sitting on Jesse's shoulder, and Tulip kind of being the demon who sits on Jesse's shoulder. And those roles were borne out again in this episode, because Tulip tempted him, and he left his truck, he left his church to go and seek revenge with her. Mm-hmm. So total temptation, totally bad intentions. And what do we see Cassidy trying to do? He's trying to protect Jesse. He's trying to save Jesse. He thinks that Jesse is so wild and impulsive and out of control that if he somehow smooths things over, he's not only protecting the angels, but he's also protecting Jesse from getting hurt when they try to extract the entity.
Right.
So I just really felt like that was a lot about just the continued really opposite roles of Cassidy and Tulip.
What's the secret word? Juxtaposition.
Yes. So let's move on to the Book of Job. What was something that you saw that was challenging for a character, or what was your bad for kind of the episode?
My bad is so bad.
Oh, no.
So the boy, Chris, Donnie's son.
Yeah.
When Donnie is walking Chris to the bus stop, and they have their little interaction about, I'm not really hurting your mom. I mean, I am, but I'm not,
Adults are complicated.
Right. And so he's having this super awkward talk with Chris, and Chris kind of is like, okay, I get it, but I don't get it. And then Chris apologizes for ratting him out. Mm-hmm. And he tells him that he attacked a boy who mocked Donnie for getting beat up by Jesse. And he beat him up good. And my heart just sank. He is turning into Donnie.
Oh my God, that's exactly what I thought. Donnie is creating a miniature version of himself.
It made me nauseous. I was just like the little boy from the pilot episode. Pray for me, preacher.
Yeah.
Who wanted to save his mom, and he didn't want his dad dead, but he wanted him to stop hurting his mom.
And he kind of wanted him to be punished, I thought.
Right. He wanted to be hurt bad.
Yeah.
Now he is, beating up other kids and beating them up bad for mocking his dad. And, his dad is the least sympathetic character of the show. And it made my heart sink that Chris was turning into mini-me Donnie.
Which is, like I said, when I watched that scene, that's exactly what I walked away with, is that Donnie is creating another Donnie.
Yes. And, every scene that he is in, I feel sorry for the actor. He is just so loathsome, because even the scene, again, back on the bus, and he kind of steps up, and all the little kids
are mocking him.
Right, yeah. Squeal like a rabbit in a bear trap. Wee, wee, wee. So, and he's just so petty and such a bully that I was really disappointed in Chris, and I hope that's kind of maybe a one-off, or Preacher sets him straight, or I don't know, but that hurt my heart.
I'm not laughing because it hurt your heart, but just because
we both went there.
The other thing was, I thought it was a really cool juxtaposition between Donnie and Linus, because Donnie shows up at the door of the bus, and he's got his broken arm, which is from Preacher.
Oh,
and Linus has his bandaged face.
I didn't even
which
catch
is from
that.
Preacher. It was just a really cool visual seeing them together in the screen.
Yeah, the two least sympathetic characters. Linus is a creeper. But, we've seen more awful things that Donnie has actually done. So, yeah, that's funny that you caught that. I didn't catch that.
So, my book of Job was the treatment of Cowboy, which actually was, where did he go? Who is he? Are we not going to talk about Cowboy again? I just kind of felt like it would have been good continuity for the series for them to just even splash in just a few seconds of this is what's going on with that storyline. They didn't have to explain anything. They didn't have to make it a big deal, but I thought it would have been helpful in terms of continuing to tie up loose ends to show something about Cowboy. Right.
So that'll be part of my revelation.
Ah, okay, very good. Yeah. Well, I'm done with my trials and tribulations of Job. So why don't we move on to Revelation?
Well, it's kind of part of my revelation, but part of, it tags on to your bad, is there was no sign in this episode, and I am very disappointed in Preacher.
No sign?
No sign!
Oh, no, there was!
Was there? What was it?
You're talking about the sign at the church, right?
Okay, episode 1 was open your ass and holes to Jesus. Somebody keeps messing with the congregation sign. And
I can't remember what last week's was.
Last week's was Jesus, free with store purchase.
So this week was run. Jesus is coming.
Okay. I thought that was episode 4, but
no, that was this
I had
week.
that in my phone. That a picture of that. Run! Jesus is coming! Run! Yeah. Okay. So no bad on that.
Okay.
I think I have the screen cap for the next episode sign too. I'm in love with the sign.
It's really funny.
Because I also feel that I would be the person messing with it.
Well, and I think I remember Seth Rogen saying that it was a nod to The Simpsons. And I'll be honest with you and say I have not watched enough of The Simpsons. It just never piqued my interest to know exactly what he's referring to, but he said it was a nod to The Simpsons.
So in the opening credits for The Simpsons, they go through the same sequence of stuff all the time, it's the same opening sequence, but there was always Bart writing on the blackboard after school, I will not talk in class or whatever, and it's always something that is currently relevant.
Okay.
I will not plagiarize my wife's speeches. It's
Now, who were you referring to with the whole presidential thing again?
I'm gonna leave that in confession. I know that's Catholicism, but anyway,
It's all good. It works for me.
right. Well, I'm even bringing something at my little tidbits. I'm even bringing something out of Judaism. So,
Right on.
yeah, I'm encompassing preacher with all faiths.
I'm pretty much sticking with Judeo-Christian tradition, but yeah.
Well, I think it all springs from the same source. I mean, it may be. It's like water. It falls from the sky, but it winds up everywhere in different forms.
There you go.
I just came up with that one on the fly.
Very good.
You don't even have to edit me to sound articulate and clever.
It makes my job so much easier. So my revelation was really truly the revelation that our space apparently is complicit in Tracy Loach's injury.
Yeah.
And the thing that really reveals that in this episode is that he's saying to his dad, "Oh, did you hear about Tracy Loach? I was thinking maybe she needed visitors." And his dad was like, "Stay away. You don't want to get yourself killed." So I do think she was part of his injury, whether it was a murder-suicide, whether it was a suicide pact.
Yeah.
I absolutely think you're right. And I think that Tracy is somehow enmeshed in Eugene's stuff, in our space's stuff. And I wonder when the parishioners referred to him as a murderer in the last episode, maybe they're kind of considering Tracy as already dead, that he essentially murdered that girl.
Right.
Or maybe there's an even bigger story and it'll be revealed to us at some point.
I was going to say the only other possibility with murder is that, maybe she was pregnant at the time and she lost a child or, something to that effect or that, he tried to kill her and her new boyfriend or, but there is definitely their story arcs cross.
Absolutely. I think so too. And I hope that we get more of a revelation as far as that goes.
Right.
I'm going to apologize to people for my totally unprofessional sound with my barking dogs. As I said, I don't have Jesse here going, "Be quiet."
And not that we would want him to.
So, in terms of the word, in terms of just the other things that we noticed, one of the things that I realized when I was rewatching was, oh my God, this is Danny. This is the person that Jesse and Tulip were talking about in the last episode. And we assumed, you and I, that Danny was a man.
Right.
And no, Danny was right there in the beginning. And she was that crazy woman who wanted Tulip to kill her husband.
Right. I even wrote that down. I was like, Danny's a woman who wants her husband dead.
And the way that she described her husband, he just eats. He's like a tusk-faced boar, or tusky boar, or something like that. And I was like, that's the sin of gluttony. She's describing the sin of gluttony.
Oh, that was an amazing catch. Now I'm going to have to look for the 7 deadly sins. You're going to make me go back and rewatch all 3 episodes now.
Oh, that's super funny. You can just move forward. You can look up the 7 deadly sins and just move forward.
Yeah, that's true. So we have gluttony. Check.
I also could not figure out, and I was thinking for a minute, is it Odin? Is it Quincannon? But who did Danny give that map to when she got it from Tulip?
Right. It was a guy at the Houston's 4th annual Snuff Film Festival.
Oh, how did you catch that it was the Snuff Film Festival? I mean, I knew that there was something really bizarre going on.
Right. So they're all sitting in this little theater, in this kind of industrial, almost basement type setting.
Right.
And Danny gives them the map. And, I told you my girl was good. And so she leaves, and then he gets up and leaves. Big man in a white suit with a white hat, but we never see his face. And he walks out, and as he's walking down the hallway, you catch a poster that says Houston's 4th annual Snuff Film Festival.
Oh, God. So he kind of carries himself like Quincannon. That would certainly be somewhere where we would see the man who is listening to dying cows as if they're Enya. I mean, it totally makes sense for him to be at a snuff film festival.
Right.
But what motivation would he have?
And I think the body type was wrong.
Do ya?
Yeah.
Maybe too tall and too slender, or...
Really, I thought he was more of Sheriff Root's build.
Oh, that would be interesting.
Yeah, I don't think it was Sheriff Root, but I think, I don't know.
Well, and the other thing is this man in a white suit symbolic of more, for lack of a better term, angels from heaven? Is he maybe somebody from heaven?
Right. But, as we've seen, not all good guys wear white hats, and not all bad guys wear black hats. And sheriffs wear really small hats.
Right. And this hat was proportionate to his head, so we know he's not law enforcement. At least not for Anvil.
Or he was off duty and that was not his uniform. You and I are going to need to get tiny sheriff's hats.
We are. I think we're going to have to wear that for Halloween this year.
That would be amazing.
Speaking of Sheriff Root, I kind of thought the whole thing where he turns to the Watchers, the angels, after they tell him sort of the truth, basically saying that there's something on the loose and things are going to get worse.
The story he told.
Yeah, which was bizarre. I mean, I know that he was trying to make a point about how just crazy and bad the world is.
Right.
But it was just a bizarre way to respond to what was shared with him.
Well, he did say at some point, he said something about kind of this world is horrible or something to that effect.
Right.
It's so funny. Our character of the week, Eugene, he is so hopeful and good and sweet and just... It's so sad that his mom is
absent.
What's the word I want? She's in like a fugue state almost.
I think she's close to catatonic, but not quite.
Right. And his dad is, I mean, for as good as as hopeful as Eugene is, his dad is the exact opposite.
Yes, I agree. And he's miserable. He baits Eugene on a regular basis.
Yeah, and the whole he won't call Donnie out on him beating his wife unless she makes it. He wouldn't even talk to him. He is burned out is not even the word for it. It's just sad. And I like I said, Donnie is the least sympathetic character. I do have sympathy for Sheriff Root because
do you?
I do. I mean, look at what he's been through. He's the sheriff of this small town. His wife is nearly catatonic. His son can barely leave the house without causing conflict. And he has to care for his now physically disabled son, who can be probably annoyingly sunny sometimes.
We call that caregiver burnout.
Yeah, exactly. And he's also law enforcement, and they see, some of the dregs of society, whether it's criminals or people who just find themselves in really bad places.
Yeah, I'm kind of aware of that.
Exactly. So, I do have sympathy for the guy.
Interesting.
Yeah,
okay. I can see that.
Yeah,
and I may have a little more sympathy for him in the future, but.
Humility die.
So, anything else that kind of struck you in terms of just wandering through the word?
A lot.
Oh boy. Okay, so we are at nearly an hour, so we just have to...
I will run through it very quickly. So, did you notice the name of the map?
Oh God, no, you are so good at this.
Grail Industries.
Well, that certainly is a biblical reference.
Right. Grail as in the Holy Grail.
Right.
A dish, plate, stone, or cup that is part of an important theme of Arthurian literature. According to legend, it has special powers and is designed to provide happiness, eternal youth, and food in infinite abundance. So, yeah.
Wow, I've never heard that definition before. I just always think of the Grail as the cup of Christ and the cup that held Christ's blood.
Well, apparently, like I said, religion is like water. It falls all over the earth and becomes different forms. There is references to the Grail in literature pre-Bible. So
Really?
yes. The Google told me so.
So what do you think the Grail is in this circumstance? Do you think it's just another thing that is kind of hooking us back into those biblical references? Or do you think that the meaning is going to become clearer as we go along?
Well, it definitely has some significance because we were introduced to Tulip getting the map, killing for this map and nearly getting killed, and then trading the map for the information on Carlos, and now we're introduced to this mysterious character in the white suit who's at a snuff film festival.
Right.
So this map is of great importance to somebody. And so what Grail Industries is, I don't know. Like I said, it looked like blueprints to me, but they're calling it a map. So yeah, I don't know what to do with that.
And the other thing is so your definition of Grail, what you brought forward is a lot about sustenance and a lot about nourishment. So when you think about some of those images, Quincannon and the meatpacking plant, Eugene and his meat milkshake. So it just kind of makes you wonder if there's not a connection there too.
Right. Grail Industries maybe has something to do with the company that's trying to meet with Odin about the meat and power plant. Maybe.
Oh, meat and power.
Yes,
sustenance and power.
It is Quincannon Meat and Power.
Yeah. So, but when you think about it in reference to the Grail,
youth, food, and even in abundance.
Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah. So Danny's van in the scene where she's getting out to go into the Snuff Film Festival theater.
It looked like it was kind of like Tupperware-y kind of stuff almost.
So the name of the business on the van is Mitzvah on the Spot. So like mitzvah, like bat mitzvah, bar mitzvah.
Right.
And this is where I said I was bringing Judaism into this. So the meaning of mitzvah is a commandment. Refers to the precepts and commandments commanded by God.
Really?
So we circle back to it. Commandments by God.
So what on earth is she doing?
Yeah.
Huh, that's interesting.
Getting a map for Grail Industries, and her business apparently is mobile bat mitzvahs.
Well, so one of the things that I was thinking about too is that, we see the angels kind of telling Root a half-truth. We see...
As if they could tell him the whole truth.
Right. We see Tulip kind of telling a partial truth about Jessie to the trooper who pulls her over. But it's hugely enmeshed in all these lies and this acting. And so I was thinking, that a lot of this episode is about partial truths.
Yeah. Yeah.
Or maybe even those polite lies on which we all exist.
Yeah. Little white lies. Yeah. So one of the other things that I had in my revelations was, again, the cowboy. We didn't see him. So we go back to the word, the power of the word. If you've noticed in the very few scenes that the cowboy is in, he says very little.
Oh, how interesting.
Right? So, last episode I said, Cowboy 1881 and the wink and blink and a nod was from 1889. And, maybe the entity was an 8-year-old who liked lullabies. And so it was brought to my attention that, yes, the cowboy does not say very much. So I wonder if he knew the power of his words.
Very interesting.
Yeah.
We are going to learn more about the cowboy. We both agree on that.
Absolutely.
He's modeled after a character in the comic books that has a very unusual role.
Ah.
For lack of better description, and certainly not wanting to spoil anything, because I don't know how true they're going to be to the introduction that I've had to him in the comic books. I haven't read a lot of it yet, but... Right.
And then the whole where they're going to have to change the story arcs and characters a little bit for television. Yeah. Moving on quickly to we finally had a little bit more on Carlos, the bad guy that double-crossed Tulip and Preacher. Tulip called him a rat bastard, money-stealing, child-killing, life-ruining son of a bee. I've already said 2 swear words this episode. So, child-killing.
Yeah. Who knows? And, she says that when Carlos double-crossed them, that was the end of good things for her and Jesse.
Yeah.
So, and I think, actually, Tulip is going to succeed. I think she's going to get...
Her way.
And I think she's going to... That Carlos is going to be pulled into the story in the flesh.
Right. It kind of has to. I mean, they can't dead-end that storyline.
Yeah, it's too big of a thing.
But, the more I watch, the more questions that I get. The deeper and deeper we go down the rabbit hole.
Well, we see them commit a robbery, and we see what looks like Jesse shooting a guard in the head.
Mm-hmm. Yep. So, again, with the dark past.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So the only number that I came up with in this episode, I don't think it's of any significance. The gas station's address was 4621. And the only thing that I could come up with biblically was the Dictionary of Bible Themes. It's numbered, and 4621 in the Dictionary of Bible Themes is the colt. And it has to do with all of 4600 is animals. And so 4621 is the colt, a young, untrained horse or donkey associated in Scripture with humility or peace.
Okay, I think it's a stretch, but it's a perfect stretch.
Right, yeah, Preacher maybe our untrained horse,
God, that is so funny.
Yeah, so that was the only number that I could come up. So sometimes numbers just don't pan out.
Yeah, so I was watching so hard for numbers, I totally missed the stuff around Donnie's face in the toilet stall, in the restroom stall.
I do a lot of pausing and rewinding.
Okay.
Yeah. And so the only other thing that I had for this episode was our featured character is Eugene, and I was kind of looking at meanings of names, and Eugene is derived from a Greek word meaning well-born or good-born. So, yeah, as the only seemingly at this point good character. I mean, yes, he does have a past, that seems very dark, but who doesn't?
But he's a character that evokes compassion, and no one else, even Cassidy, as much as I like him, evokes any kind of compassion.
Right. Yeah, he seems to be so good, and the only thing he wants is, he's like a little puppy. The only thing he wants is love, and I feel so terrible for him, because there was at one point, I believe it was either in this episode or last episode. It was last episode where he said that God no longer speaks to him.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that's interesting that Jesse has the word of God, basically. And so I think he's looking to Preacher to, be the voice, the God speaking to him again.
But I think this may be, and I hope, a place where Jesse sees the negative possibilities of having the word and refrains from using it on Eugene.
Right.
Interesting.
Yes. So we end the episode at Ted's eulogy.
Right.
And I just thought it was so sad that it was just Jesse and Emily.
Yeah.
The preacher and his assistant attending the funeral. You have an entire congregation. And, they didn't have large numbers, but there were still people showing up every week. And nobody came to Ted's funeral.
Mm-hmm.
I think that is terrible.
And what came out of the ground at the end of the funeral?
There was a gas emitted from a pipe, a gas of some sort.
So was it something metaphysical, like the entity, or was it something like maybe some drain off from Quincannon's meatpacking plants?
Well, we have some ominous music, so I'm going to say that it's not happenstance. So, I think that's probably going to come up at some point, whether it's, I didn't even think of that, a runoff from Quincannon's Meat and Power, or we have guys from heaven coming for the entity. Could we possibly have guys coming from hell?
Based on what little I know about the entity from the comic books, that's a possibility.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know that it is in the comic book arc, because I haven't gotten that far, but I think that's a very real possibility.
Well, at this point in the comics, do you know what the entity is?
Yes.
Okay, because like I said last episode, it says it right on the front of IMDb's page. Yeah. So I've been trying not to spoil it at this point, but anyone who's read the synopsis on IMDb, you know what it is, mm-hmm. And so it is very possible that heaven and hell are looking for the entity.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So just ending out the episode at poor Ted's funeral. And I think in one of the Scandinavian countries, there is actually, whenever somebody dies and there is no mourners at their funeral, the local government or something actually has a poem commissioned for that person.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So, and you can actually hire professional mourners for about $70 an hour. It's a thing.
Yeah, I actually have seen that before. Yeah.
Yeah. So, poor Ted.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think that's where we're going to end it.
I think that is a good place to end tonight.
Poor Ted.
And we'll probably hit episode 4 in about a week.
We hope so. That episode's called Monster Swamp. So,
which is a reference to Root's story in this episode, because he talks about it's a monster swamp out there. I think he says it to Eugene.
I didn't catch that. Yeah, that was part of his whole, humanity is awful.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think we ended see the possibilities, and now we have Monster Swamp, because I don't think those go together.
They might. We'll see what it looks like.
Yeah. So.
All right. Have a good night.
You too. We will see you next time.
All right. Very good.
I left his body